Hello and welcome back everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm gonna continue the story What If Naruto Was Raised by Kakashi Part 3. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
6 is the age a small brown animal walked slowly through the Hitachi's house. His black, squashed nose moved quickly as he sniffed all the time, making a sound like a cold on fast forward. He pushed one door open and walked slowly into the middle of the room. He then gave a little hop that didn't look like it would be enough to get him onto the raised bed in front of him. But it did, and he landed delicately on short legs and walked over the bump in the middle of the mattress like it was nothing. "Pup, it's time to get up," I said. The lump mumbled and moved a little, then stopped. The creature sighed and started to paw at the spot where he thought the lump's head should be. "Come on, get up, and get to school. I didn't help you with all that math last night so you wouldn't have to turn it in today." The scolding and pawing were so persistent that the lump eventually wiggled and whimpered and pushed back the covers, revealing Naruto's tangled head. "Pakuan," he whimpered. The dog didn't care. "Up, pup," he said over and over. Naruto smiled and rubbed his eye to get the sleep out of it. He asked, "Is Dad back yet?" Though he already knew the answer. The dog gave a head shake. "No, but you know what to do. Get up, get dressed, feed me, and get to school." The child got out of bed and got ready for the day. About 10 months ago, Naruto's new father's long-term leave was finally overturned by the Hokage. The old man had been trying to ease Kakashi back into it by giving him a new genin team every year. He had secretly planned to keep doing this until Kakashi found one he liked, but since the Hitachi kept rejecting every team that was put in front of him, the leader of the village had to use more direct methods. The fact that Kakashi was back among the active shinobi was a relief, since the number of shinobi was at an all-time low because of a certain demon fox with huge paws that was trampling through town. On this occasion, he was sent on a mission with a group of his old Anbu war buddies to find a hidden camp of shinobi spies from another country. The rumors in the underworld said that it was run by Kumo-born ninja, either loyal or traitors. Sarutobi thought that if Kakashi was on the team that confronted them, it might make them run for their borders even faster. As he had promised a long time ago, Kakashi had left one of his dogs to watch over Naruto, along with instructions for the boy to go home with Kiba if his father didn't pick him up from school on the second day of absence. Sume would take care of him no matter how the mission turned out. The child was able to stay in Kiba's class, which surprised some people who thought he would graduate at an oddly young age. Kakashi answered questions by saying that Naruto wouldn't be able to graduate until he was about 12, so moving him up a grade after a grade wouldn't help. The young Hitachi got ready for a day of learning, stumbling a few times and yawning from time to time because Pakun wasn't very good at getting to sleep. Far away, just inside the Wind Country border, an older Hitachi moved around while keeping his eye on the unchanging horizon. He could see it through a small hole in the illegal, hidden fort that looked like another sand dune from the outside. When the door is closed, even someone climbing up the sloped walls outside wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Inside was a box made of tarp. Sand pushed in from all sides, but thick canvas held it back. The canvas was held up by a frame of hardwood poles. It was hard to breathe, uncomfortable, and very hot. Even though the sun had only been up for a few hours, Kakashi was already dripping with sweat. Something hit him in the elbow, and Kakashi broke his watch to look at the other person in the shelter. Sarutobi Asuma had just recently come back to the village after being gone since Kakashi brought Naruto back. People said that the man left because he and his father had reached a breaking point, but Kakashi hadn't asked Asuma for more information. Now that he was back, the Hitachi treated him like he'd never been away. The man with dark hair was holding up a small box of chewing tobacco. He couldn't stop being addicted to nicotine just because he was on a mission, but smoking on this stakeout would be suicidal, either because the smoke would give you away if you opened a vent to let it out or because your teammates would kill you for making the already awful air in the shelter even worse if you didn't. Chewing tobacco was a good way to make things work. Kakashi shook his head and said, "No," so Asuma took some for himself and then dropped the tin after securing it. Both men were silent. The man with silver hair kept an eye on the rising sun, which told him what time it was. He thought about the little blonde boy at home, who was probably just as bored as he was. He would be at the academy right now, and most Fridays start with a theoretical lesson, like reading or math. By the end, the poor kid would be about to cry. Overall, though, Kakashi was happy with how well Naruto had adjusted to the whole school thing. After moving up 2 classes in 2 weeks, the father was ready for a rough start in Kiba's class as well, but had been pleasantly surprised by how well everything went. He took his son to the new classroom as told and met the teacher who would be in charge of this group for the rest of the school year. The academy assigned teachers to classes, not grades, so this teacher would teach 3rd form this year and 4th form next year. He would follow the students up the ladder until they graduated, at which point he would be given another class of 1st form students. Anyway, the teacher of this class was a young man named Yumino Iruka. He was a chunin, and Kakashi thought he had seen him around. He gave the man a small bow before telling Naruto that this was his new classroom and that Iruka-sensei was his new teacher. He then waited with bated breath to see what Naruto would say. He didn't need to worry. The blonde child walked right up to Iruka-sensei, tilted his face almost straight up to look him in the eye, and asked, "Are you a real ninja?" To Iruka's credit, he didn't let any of it bother him. After a short pause, he answered just as honestly, "Yes, I am." "Now go sit down." Naruto looked at his father and gave him a smile. "This teacher is better, Daddy, because he is a ninja." "Good," Kakashi had said, giving the other adult in the room an apology look. "Sit down and do what I say, I'll see you after school." And the little boy had stopped making trouble, yet. The Junin was brought back to the present by a smudge on the horizon. Kakashi narrowed his eyes and nudged Asuma, then nodded to show the smudge. Asuma gave him another nod and leaned forward, waiting. Slowly, frustratingly slowly, the smudge turned into a person, who slowly turned into the person they'd been waiting for, their informant. He got close to the hideout and nervously looked around for a sign of where to go. Kakashi looked him over carefully to see if he was lying or using genjutsu. Then he looked around to see if there were any clues that the man was being watched or followed. Nothing. When the Sarutobi looked at Asuma, he shook his head to show that he hadn't seen anything either. Kakashi cleared his throat and spoke for the first time in hours. His voice was raspy as he spoke. "Let him in." When they opened the door to the shelter, it was like turning on the heat. The inside was blasted with heat, which scared away any coolness left over from the night. The informant saw the gap right away and snuck in while Asuma slammed the door shut behind him. It was tight for 3. Kakashi looked at the sweating man in front of him and tried not to look uncomfortable, even though he could kiss the man if he just leaned forward a little bit. He asked straight out, "Do you have it?" The person gave a nod. "They changed their course, they've turned far to the south. They'll go right by you here." Asuma said, "Shit." The man reached for his non-existent cigarette and, when he couldn't find it, ran a hand through his hair to calm himself down. The brilliant mind of Kakashi was busy. He yelled, "How far away are they?" The source chewed on his bottom lip. "About 5 hours, he said with doubt. Kakashi nodded. They still had a while. They might be able to save this. "Okay. Asuma, run as fast as you can to the border and see if you can reach Rado on the comm unit. Rado's squad is also out our way somewhere. Then, the 5 of you, try to get around the other side of our targets and swarm them. See if you can make them change their minds about where they're going. Herd them back this way. We're still set up best here, but if we have to, we get out of here, hero. Get home quickly and make sure your story is good. It would be a pain if you got caught up in this or were called our sneak. On this mission, I don't want to have to break you out of jail before you're put to death. Things are tight enough as it is." The informant, Hiro, smiled a little and ran out the door. Asuma was moving, putting on the vest he had taken off because it was so hot and drinking a lot of water. "Are you coming?" he asked Kakashi after he had finished eating. Kakashi nodded. "I'm going to set traps up and down the line," he said. "Let's see if I can't widen our net in time. But if we can't get them to turn around and come down here, we will lose them." Asuma nodded to show that he understood. "I'll find our backup," he said. "I'll also see if there's anyone else in the area who can help us. Better luck." "And you," Kakashi said, already gathering the things he would need to set his traps. There was a wave of heat when Asuma opened the door, and then he was alone. Kakashi got himself ready for a few seconds, and then he too went outside. The shelter was empty. Naruto stuck his tongue out at the hard math problem he had just solved. Then he leaned back in his chair and looked around the class. He was in the back row, with Kiba on his left and an empty chair on his right. To Kiba's left were Shikamaru and Choji, who were friends of the Inuzukas, and to the empty chair's right was the classroom wall. 3 boys in front of him were still working on the problem, but Hitachi's father had been teaching him math and the logic needed to solve equations for as long as he could remember. So far, algebra hadn't been much of a problem for him. He looked around the class and saw a few people who had finished, like that smart girl with the pink hair. His eyes narrowed when he met the Kiwi's dark gaze. Uchiha Sasuke was the best in the class at schoolwork and with weapons, and only Naruto was better at shinobi theory and taijutsu. When the class started learning genjutsu and ninjutsu next year, there would be a fight over who was the best at those, too. The boy didn't like Naruto, which was fine because Naruto didn't like him either. He said mean things about how old the Hokage was and how dad still picked Naruto up every day instead of letting the 6-year-old walk home on his own. He also said he was better at school than the blonde, which made Naruto work harder on his schoolwork than he would have before. Iruka-sensei soon got the class's attention and went over the answers to the problems he'd given. He yelled at Kiba for a while, which took up some time. Naruto didn't know what Kiba had done, but it probably had something to do with the fact that Iruka didn't get out of his chair until lunchtime. Naruto scowled at a math problem he got wrong and yelled out where he went wrong and how to fix it. It was the only mistake he made, but it cost him. When he was done, Iruka-sensei called out for them to tell him their scores out of 16, one by one. Aburame Shino-kun. 14, Sensei. Akamori Jin-kun. 9, Sensei. Akamichi Choji-kun. 6, Sensei. There were about 30 names on the class list, but Naruto's name wasn't called for about a minute. Hitachi Naruto-chan. Naruto's face twitched when he heard the last word. Sensei, I'm not that little, he thought. He said, 15, Sensei, but it was hard to say. 2 rows ahead, a dark head went up when the door opened, and Iruka called out too soon, Uchiha Sasuke-kun. 16, Sensei, Sasuke said, then turned in his chair and smiled triumphantly at Naruto. Naruto stuck out his tongue at the annoying older boy and silently promised to do better in their next lesson. Even though he was hot and uncomfortable, Kakashi couldn't stop or slow down. He had to set up as many traps as he could, because if they didn't catch the party heading this way, they'd escape into river country and this whole mission would have been a waste of time. Kakashi was getting tired of this small group of terrorists who had set up camp inside Konoha's borders. It was frustrating that when Kakashi and his impromptu team raided the hideout, they found it mostly empty. A quick conversation with the last terrorist led them to a much bigger problem on the border of wind and rain. Suddenly, the comm unit he had put in his ear started making a buzzing sound. It was clear that the others were now close enough to hear its radio signal. General, get up. Scare them to death. Asuma, try to search one of them. Maybe you can make them think we want something they have. Separate the person in the red bandana who is in charge. If we can get him to go in the right direction, the rest will follow. They're going away. Kakashi, I doubt you can hear me, right? I can. Kakashi said clearly, not stopping his work despite the confusing mix of shouts that came through the headpiece. What's going on over there? The man on the other side said, we won't be able to get them to you. We've moved them a little, but they're pretty damn determined. We don't have enough people to attack them directly and win, and help won't get to us in time. Anything you can do? How's the progress on those traps? Kakashi finished putting a weight on the end of a wire and stood up, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. I set them up from our hideout toward you guys, but I don't think we'll get them. Stay put. Taking his gear, he started to jog, bending low to hide among the sand dunes. 10 minutes later, he dropped to his stomach on the hot sand and crawled to the top of a tall dune, looking over the top. Yes, there they were, wearing clothes that were exactly the same color as the sand they were running over. They looked like they wanted to cross the border and get away from the annoying shinobi who had come to scare them. Okay, drop back, everyone, Kakashi said. I see them. Be ready to grab 1 or 2, though. I'll try to set something up, but there's not much time. We might have to give up on this one. Don't bother. I hear ya. K. Got it. You were in charge, boss. Kakashi threw himself backwards, ripped open his bag of supplies, and ran to set up the complicated trap that he and Asuma had set up last night all by himself in about 4 minutes. He dug in the soft sand until he hit the harder sand below. He then chipped away at the harder sand to make a place to anchor a weight, even though he knew it was a waste of time. He rolled over on the hot sand to get a better look at the next dune. He quickly figured out how fast his opponents were moving and where the heavy bundle in his hand was likely to go. He said a quick prayer just in case, and then threw. The long trail of wires was hard to see except where the sun caught them and where the carefully placed tags dragged behind the bird as it flew, flapping like clothes on a clothesline. About 30 meters away from where the Hokage was carefully laid out, metal hit the sand, and a tag at the top of the wire that hadn't yet fallen went off with a slight pop. The two wires broke apart and fell apart, making a near-perfect circle in the sand as another small weight with a tag flapping behind it hit the center of the circle. As the wind picked up, it quickly buried the wires and their tags in the sand. Kakashi let out a sigh of relief when the trap disappeared as the sand dunes moved. It wasn't a moment too soon, either, because he could now hear the faint, rough steps of people running over the sand and the faint flickering of chakra as the runaways tried to speed up their movement. He moved backwards and away from the trap, trying to get out of sight before the runaways found out what he had set. He was mostly hidden by the soft, rolling sand dunes, but his strong control over his chakra did the rest. At least 4 sets of feet shuffled around the trap's edge. The chakra they were using to stay balanced was enough to set off the center tag, and a sudden sandstorm hit them from all directions when the tag exploded. There was a scream. The edge of the trap was marked with wires. Suddenly, the gravity seals on the activated tags sealed the edge of the trap, and huge amounts of sand were thrown out of the pit, which was getting bigger and bigger. Only one of the rebels was far enough away from Kakashi's trap to get away, and he ran away in a panic with one of Kakashi's kunai stuck in the back of one leg. Kakashi would send Asuma after the blood trail in a minute, but for now he had enough prisoners to take care of. The gravity seals hadn't run out of power yet, so the 4 ninjas who were spitting dirt and wiping it out of their eyes did so at the bottom of a very solid, 6-meter deep pit dug by the weighted concussion seal. They could get away, but it would be hard to do so before his backup arrived. The guy with the red bandana glared up at him and said, "Oh, you got the leader." Sand was coming out of his ears. Kakashi smiled, and as he did so, one of his eyes closed. "Gotcha," he said in a happy voice. Naruto smiled and proudly jigged on his toes. Their class had 27 students, but they were not all the same age. This made it easy to divide the genin into teams, but when it came time to spar in Taijutsu class, they were not all the same age. After lunch, Iruka-sensei took his class outside for their Taijutsu lesson. He told them that whoever did the best in the warm-up hour would be sent to spar with Jin-sensei's class, which was 1 grade higher. At that moment, Naruto looked at Sasuke and knew that if he broke his neck doing it, he would be the one sent away. In the end, nothing so bad had happened, but Iruka-sensei had picked the Hokage and sent him running to where Jin-sensei's class was pairing off on the other side of the academy grounds. Naruto had fought a big 9-year-old boy and lost, but not by much. Jin-sensei had said a few nice things to him before sending him back to his own class. Naruto bounced back into the middle of his classmates, who were still fighting. It seemed like Sasuke was taking turns fighting 3 different people, his partner and 2 girls who were always around him. As the Hokage looked on, the Uchiha threw Ino to the ground and held her there until she gave up. He then stood up and looked warily at the boy he was supposed to fight. Naruto thought with glee as he ran toward Iruka-sensei, who was correcting Choji's stance. "He looks mad." "Sensei. I'm back," he told him. Iruka told Choji, "Yes, keep that arm up, at a right angle," and then she straightened up and looked at the blonde 6-year-old. "Naruto-chan. How did it go? Did you win?" Naruto gave a head shake. "Not quite," he said. "But I almost did. I almost got him, honest." Iruka smiled, not sure if he believed or didn't believe what she said. Jin would tell him the whole story in the staff room soon enough. He asked the little boy, "Did Jin-sensei say anything?" The boy's face scrunched up as he tried to remember. "Yes," he said. "Well done, Naruto-chan, you do your family name proud." He then said, "Thank Iruka-sensei for sending you over for me. I don't think Jiro-kun has had such a good fight from someone smaller than him in a long time." The Hokage scowled for a moment. "I'm not that little, but I like Jiro. He's cool. And I saw Neji. His uncle and my dad talk sometimes, so I see him around. He looked weird. His eyes were weird. Is he sick, sensei?" Iruka shook his head and pulled Naruto to the edge of the fighting class by shaking his head. "No, he's not. I think he was using his Kekkei Genkai, the Byakugan. It's a bit complicated, so you should ask your father to explain it to you." He'll know more than I do about how it works and what it does, but it's a bit like your father's Sharingan. Naruto looked at him blankly, and Iruka sighed a little. He said, ask your father, again. Okay, sensei. The boy said with a chirp. Iruka asked next, have you stretched to cool down? Naruto said yes. Then you might have a few minutes to yourself before it's time to go inside. The 6-year-old got excited and ran to the swing that was hanging from a tree in the corner of the academy grounds. He finally figured out how to push himself on it, and he quickly got quite high. Soon, he heard Iruka-sensei tell the class to jog around the yard once to cool off and then go inside. He reluctantly let the swing come to a stop. When he got off, he ran back to the classroom, trying to avoid his classmates as they went around the yard. The rest of the kids crept into the classroom 1 or 2 at a time. Most of them looked like they had just been rolling around on the ground in pairs and pulling at their clothes and hair. Kiba, in particular, looked like he had eaten a lot of dirt when he came in, saw Naruto, grinned, and walked over to him. Good job today, kid, he said with a sharp-toothed grin and a friendly tap on the back of the younger boy. Sent to Jin-sensei's class. You're not going to leave us for them, are you? Naruto gave a head shake. Nah, he said in a casual way. Dad says there's no point in moving me up because I can't graduate early anymore because of that new law. He'd rather I stay where I have friends to play with and a teacher who can handle my quirks, whatever that means. The blonde was confused by his older friend, who was smiling more. I think he means that you and Iruka-sensei are both one of a kind, he said diplomatically. Sasuke had followed Kiba in and was standing nearby, frowning at his usual group of female followers. He laughed a little. I still can't believe anyone would let a baby like you in, Itachi, but I guess you make a good mascot. Naruto got angry right away. He half yelled, I beat you in Taijutsu today. Sasuke turned around to face him with his eyes fully rolled. Sure you did, he said back with a bitter tone. You're a spoiled brat who has the teachers wrapped around his or her little finger, and I beat you in math. Again, you stupid baby. Don't call him names. Kiba jumped up to defend Naruto, even though the whole class was looking at them. Sasuke looked at him angrily. Shut up, you stupid head, he said back, using the worst insult an 8-year-old could come up with. Kiba yelled in anger and jumped at the Uchiha. To his surprise, the more skilled boy let him hit him in the middle, sending both of them to the ground. The Inuzuka yelled, You're a stupid head. As the two rolled over and over again. Their classmates ran away to avoid getting pulled into the fight. Sasuke yelled, I'm not. He grabbed Kiba's hair and pulled as hard as he could. He heard Kiba squeal with a bit of wild pleasure and then yelled back when Kiba poked him in the eye in response. This made Sasuke free one arm so he could punch Kiba in the nose. From there, things got worse, turning into a tangled mess of screaming, pinching, pulling, kicking, biting arms, legs, and teeth. Some of the boys and girls were yelling for the boys to stop and for Kiba to leave Sasuke-kun alone, while Naruto's and Kiba's friends cheered on the brunette and made fun of the Uchiha. Naruto danced around on his toes, giving Kiba orders and trying to get in Sasuke's way as much as he could. The rest of the class didn't choose a side. Instead, they stood on their desks and yelled for the chaos to stop. Then, all of a sudden, Iruka-sensei appeared above the wailing boys, grabbed each of their collars with both hands, and pulled them up and down to smash their heads together. This stopped them from fighting, and he lifted them up until they were just hanging by their toes above the ground. The teacher yelled, What the hell is going on here? Everyone please sit down right now. There was a rush, and soon everyone was behind their desk except Kiba, Sasuke, and Naruto, who stayed where they were. Iruka took a deep breath and lowered the fighters so they could stand on their own before they passed out. He wasn't talking to Fugaku about that. Okay, he said in a more calm, and somehow much more dangerous voice, while his brown eyes looked around the classroom for someone who could be trusted to tell on the others. Sakura-kun, tell me what happened. The girl with pink hair began to tell the story right away. When Sasuke-kun came in with everyone else, Kiba and Naruto were talking, and they weren't exactly quiet, sensei. Kiba said something that made Sasuke kind of laugh, so Kiba yelled at him, Sasuke said something back, and Kiba attacked him. Kiba yelled indignantly, That's not what happened. He called me a baby and Kiba a stupid head. Naruto shouted with the same anger, even though it was clear that he didn't really understand what had caused Kiba to attack the boy with dark hair. He's a big, mean jerk. Sasuke's eyes lit up and he took a step toward the blonde, but before he could say anything, the teacher stopped him. Iruka snapped a few minutes early. Okay, that's enough. Everyone out. School's over for today. She had one hand on Sasuke's shoulder, half afraid that the bigger boy would hurt Naruto if they fought. Two 8-year-olds fighting was one thing, but an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old fighting was something else entirely. Kiba-kun, you stay, he told him as the rest of the class started to leave, avoiding the angry teacher. Sasuke-kun, you didn't start the fight, so you can go. But if you do something like this again, I'll have to call your father, he said. Sasuke's dark eyes grew a little wider. That would be bad, because he would never earn his father's respect by acting up in school. The Uchiha's head went down. Yes, sensei, he said as the adult let him go. He silently promised not to fight with anyone else again, no matter how annoying some idiots were. At least, he thought that way until he showed father that he was just as good as Itachi. Then he would teach Kiba a few things. And maybe the blonde baby who thought he knew everything, though Sasuke didn't like the idea of beating up a kid. What if he was just a little scared? As Sasuke slid out the door and headed home, he glared at the Hokage. Naruto was angry as he watched him leave. He then looked at Kiba with regret and slunk toward the door. Iruka-sensei called out, Naruto-chan, you should stay too, please. Naruto winced, but he stood still near the door and looked closely at his sandals as Iruka went off on Kiba, telling him how upset the teacher was with him for his behavior and where it would lead him, as well as what would happen if he ever used his fists to settle a dispute on school grounds again. After giving Mizuki-sensei 3 days of detention to clean up anything the assistant teacher thought was dirty enough, he was sent out of the room. Kiba left looking like he had been beaten like a dog, but the look he gave Naruto as he left the room said, "Don't worry about me, kid," with hints of "sensei's stupid," and "I do it again." The angry teacher then left Naruto alone with him. When Iruka looked at Naruto, he quickly said, "I didn't do anything. I didn't fight anyone, and Sasuke was the first one to insult me. He said I was a baby, but I'm not." I know, Naruto-chan." Naruto bristled at the suffix, which irritated him on principle, but he didn't say anything. His childish intuition told him it was a bad idea, given how hard it was clear Iruka was trying to soften his voice and how that vein in his forehead pulsed in a way that belied the anger still boiling under the surface. The teacher turned away from the class for a long time to calm himself down. You can't just yell and scream at a 6-year-old. That wouldn't get anywhere. When he felt like he had enough control again, he turned back to the boy and sighed as he sat down on the first of the low stairs that led to the desks in the back rows. Naruto-chan, I know that you and Sasuke-kun don't get along very well, he said. Naruto huffed with anger and sat down next to Iruka. He's mean, and he thinks he's better than me, even though he's not, the blonde said with a straight face. Iruka carefully kept his mouth shut. In reality, Sasuke was probably a little smarter than Naruto, but there was a reason Naruto was in this class, and Iruka would bet that if the current Naruto faced Sasuke when the Uchiha was 6 or 7, Naruto would win easily. Try to get along with Sasuke-kun, the teacher said in a strict voice. You're both the best students in the class, but Naruto-chan is much younger than his classmates. There's more to being a shinobi than being smart, and if you don't seem mature enough to deal with a rival, I'll take the pressure off and put you back in Akemi-sensei's class. Iruka could tell from Naruto's half-scared face that he thought he could do it, which was all that mattered. The teacher just said, "You can go," and stood up to show the boy out of the classroom. Then he went back to his seat and fell asleep. The day had been long. Kakashi sighed as he walked out of the Hokage tower and into the middle of Konoha's nightlife as he walked down the street. It was late, so late that Naruto would be sound asleep by the time he got home. If Pakun failed as a babysitter, he would have to eat dry kibbles for a week, so there was no real reason to hurry. As he walked along the road, he almost didn't move fast enough to avoid getting hit by Genma, who was a little bit pink. Kakashi. You're back. We're back. Everybody's back, he shouted. Kakashi asked General dryly, feeling a little horny? As the man put his arm around the masked man's neck and put most of his weight on it. A little drunk, an amused woman said, and the Hokage looked in the direction of the voice. Ah. Long time no see, Kurenai. She had a pretty smile. I've been around, but you've been the antisocial one, he said. Kakashi didn't even think about that. Later, Kakashi would swear up and down, silently, in his head, because saying it out loud would only encourage the tossers, that his friends, had used some kind of black magic to force him to do what he did that night. Hitachi Sharingan Kakashi, whose name kept coming up here and there, couldn't possibly sit in a bar with Anko, Asuma, Genma, Kurenai, Rado, Yugao, and Hayate, who had finally gotten over his cold and wasn't coughing, drinking sake and telling stories. But somehow, it happened, and Kakashi ended up with more alcohol on board than he'd had in a long time at one sitting. The bar finally kicked them out, and around 2 a.m., the group stumbled out into the street. As the crowd spread out, Anko made his way over to Kakashi. "I don't suppose you want to come home with me, do you?" Kakashi took his arm off of Anko's and pushed her away, rolling his eyes at her obvious pass-throwing. He wasn't drunk, per se, and was more than sober enough to handle this situation. "Anko, I have a kid at home." The woman didn't care. "Okay, let's try this again. I don't think you want to invite me to your house, do you?" "Kids, wake up early, Anko." Kakashi avoided Anko's attempt to touch him and swayed a bit. "I'm not going to have that, Daddy. What are you doing with that woman?" "Talk with my 6-year-old. Anko stopped trying to hurt him so she could grin and look at him with a wicked gleam in her eyes. "I think I smell childhood trauma. Have we talked about this before?" she asked in a half-fishy, half-teasing way. Kakashi shuddered. "I don't want to talk about it anymore," he said with a firm voice. He was vaguely aware that he was saying more than he usually did, but he didn't feel too worried about it. "All I can say is that I don't want it to happen again, especially if I have to explain it." "So a postponement," Kakashi sighed. Incorrigible. "Anko, you know what a monster my kid is. Why would you want to do something that might give you one of your own to deal with? Especially since I've clearly proven my own." Anko asked. "Idiocy? Ability to get a girl pregnant by accident, even if you're careful?" Kakashi sighed. "Instead, go follow Aoba," he said. Anko considered, before brightening. "Okay. He's a bigger tightwad than you are, so he'll be a real challenge," she said, and then she left quickly. "Have fun," Kakashi called after her. Success. No one likes waking up after drinking enough to feel a little less frozen, let alone a usually clean-cut ninja like the copycat ninja. Kakashi's eyes slid open, and he groaned before giving up on the idea of getting up today. Just staying alive was hard enough. "It's your own fault," a woman's voice said in a soft tone. "Akino," Kakashi said as he reached for the big, red dog. "I didn't think I called you," he said. "You didn't," the dog said in a nice voice. She didn't react when her owner accidentally poked her in the eye while trying to pet her. "Pakun was worried when you came in at 3 a.m. and decided to sleep on the rug. He couldn't get you up and moving again, so he called me." The dog had a lot of common sense and would have been the best choice in this situation. Kakashi nodded groggily and rubbed his throbbing head. He thought that at least he knew why he was soaking wet and in bed. It was clear that 2 dogs had tried to wake him up before deciding to just let him sleep it off. "Arg, why did I let them trick me into drinking again?" Akino just sniffed, torn between amusement and disapproval. She didn't ask who them was, but she guessed correctly that Kakashi's friends his age had caught him at a weak moment and got him to act human for a short time. Then, Kakashi winced when he heard a noise in the hallway, and Akino laughed. "Uh-oh," she said in a soft voice. "Looks like you forgot something. You're going to have to get up today after all." Kakashi groaned loudly and threw his pillow over his face, half seriously trying to suffocate himself. There was a series of clacks, bangs, and thumps as the bedroom door was opened so quickly that it slammed into the wall next to it and bounced off with enough force to close the door again after the person who had rushed in. "Dad. Daddy. You're home." Something hit him in the stomach, and Kakashi groaned again, but this time not as loudly. "Naruto," he breathed out. "What's the time?" There was a pause, and Kakashi didn't really fight when 2 small hands wrapped around his right wrist and pulled it away from the pillow that was still tightly covering the adult's head. Naruto chewed his tongue and looked at the tiny clock, which was only as wide as a screw sewn into Kakashi's sleeve, for a moment. "The little hands on the 6, and the big hands on the 9, he said after a short pause. "I'll have to remember to teach you how to tell time," Kakashi said as he took back his hand and tossed his pillow in a random direction. Akino yelled as it hit her hard enough to make her fall off the bed backwards. Naruto laughed, and then he pulled hard on Kakashi's arm. "Dad, it's so cool that you're home. I missed you. Did you do a lot? Where were you? What was your mission? Did you meet anyone cool? Was it cold? Did you catch the bad guys? Pakun's not a very good babysitter because he always lets me stay up and eat ice cream before breakfast, which is cool, but I don't think you'd like it much. You don't have to work today, do you? It's..." The kid ran away, and Kakashi groaned again. He almost wished he'd gone home with Anko after all, since she would have let him sleep off his hangover. Akino laughed in an unhelpful way. "Well, good luck," she said with a smile, and then she went away. Kakashi glared at the place where she had been before, promising in her mind that she would get even later. In the meantime, he rolled over and sat up groggily, then reached for his kunai pouch and dug around in it until he found his little first aid sachet. Inside, he quickly found some painkillers and his last hydro pill, which was a good quick fix for a shinobi who was thirsty and needed to get better quickly. He'd need to get more. He'd used almost all of his stash in Suna, and he'd just thrown away his last pill on a hangover. By the time Naruto bounced back into the room, he was starting to feel like a human again. He stumbled into the shower in the next door bathroom, ignoring his excited 6-year-old son who was running in and out of his room. He had to get out of the nice hot shower eventually, which was made worse by the fact that a small child had started banging on the tinted glass walls and hollering like someone trying to get sheep out of a pen. "Okay," the man said with a sigh as he turned off the water jet. "Okay, Naruto, get out of here. Go on, go. Make us lunch, then, shoo. Let me get dressed, you weird kid." While the blonde was cooking, Kakashi quickly got dressed and ran to the Hokage tower to ask for a day off so he could explore the forest outside the village. While his request was being processed, he went to the hospital and forced a doctor to flush the rest of the alcohol out of his system. While the poor kid wasn't looking, he stole a stash of hydro pills. When he was feeling 100% better, he went back to the Hokage tower, got his yellow ticket of leave, and went home slowly. Naruto was still in the kitchen, yelling at the orange juice, which was too high up in the fridge for him to reach with the heavy glass bottle. Before things got worse, Kakashi leaned over the blonde's head and took the bottle off the shelf. He smiled as he filled Naruto's waiting water bottle. "All set?" he asked as he looked at the pile of instant ramen packets and the mess of what looked like a sandwich. Naruto yelled, "Yes," and the small Hitaki family left the house a few minutes later. The rest of the day was a blur of sweet moments that happened over and over again. Naruto, who was a very active child, couldn't stop talking and jumping around because his father had come home. Once his hangover was gone, Kakashi was much better able to join in and even enjoy his son's joy. He spent the day encouraging him and telling him, edited, stories about his mission. Before it got dark, Kakashi had a bad feeling that something terrible was going to happen. It was just a small niggle in the back of his mind, and he quickly pushed it out of his mind and focused on telling Naruto to stay away from the small bonfire he was building so that helping hands wouldn't touch the dancing flames by accident. Later, years later, he would think back to that moment and wonder if maybe, just maybe, he could have stopped the terrible things that happened that night if he hadn't ignored the feeling of dread. "Okay. We're ready for them, Naru," he called. Naruto cheered and ran over with his bag of carefully saved cheese sandwiches to kneel next to his father. The fire was crackling nicely, and Kakashi smiled as he helped the blonde skewer a sandwich with a cleverly sharpened stick long enough to hold it over the flames without burning little fingers. Kakashi didn't know why the boy wanted to do this, but Naruto looked at him with those beautiful blue eyes and begged, calling him Daddy instead of Dad, like he always did when he wanted something. And the Junin didn't see what was wrong with letting the kid burn a few things. He thought that the open fire and food on a stick might appeal to the kid's instinct to catch and cook his own food. Or Naruto just liked setting things on fire. Heaven knew that Kakashi liked the same things when he was Naruto's age. Sure enough, Naruto's sandwich caught fire quickly and happily. Kakashi laughed as Naruto yelled in surprise and threw the burning mass into the nearby lake where they had paddled earlier that day. "Naru, if you shove the whole thing into the flame, it will catch fire," the adult said as Naruto tried to put another sandwich on the end of his stick. "Try holding it a little above the fire and turning it over and over. It will take longer, but you won't get a real taste of what fire tastes like." Settling back, he watched happily as Naruto lit a second and then a third sandwich on fire. Then he pulled out some kind of candy bar and used that instead. "Are you sure, Naruto, that you want to cook the candy bars that I'm going to pretend I can't see because if I saw them, I'd take them away?" Naruto told the grown-up to leave. "Be quiet, Dad. I know what I'm doing." Kakashi stepped back, and when the chocolate caught on fire before it could melt, he laughed. To his surprise, Naruto pulled back the candy, blew on it to put out the fire, and then started to happily eat the charred pieces. Kakashi could tell from his face that the little blonde boy didn't do it out of pride. Instead, He did it because he wanted scorched chocolate. Strange, thought Kakashi as he watched with interest. When Naruto went back to trying to toast his sandwiches, the moon was high and covered in clouds. Kakashi leaned back and looked at the white glowing circle, wondering if it was going to rain. But no, those clouds weren't right for rain. They just hung around, drifting over and off the moon over and over again, putting the land in darkness and light at different times. It was the perfect night for all kinds of shinobi adventures, from stealing to killing. That thought was cut off abruptly when Naruto shouted in victory and grabbed a perfectly toasted, red, not on fire, sandwich from his very messy and burned stick. The 6-year-old yelled, "I did it." As he watched Naruto, Kakashi smiled. He told her, "You've got it." "Well, he said, but then he stopped and his voice trailed off. A shiver went through him, making him feel cold to the core, and he knew. Something had gone wrong. There's something awful. "Naruto," he told the boy. "We're going home." He didn't know what was going on or what it was, but he felt an overwhelming, all-encompassing pressure to get Naruto to safety. He knew that here, outside the village, they were the most vulnerable they could be. Naruto squealed in protest as his father grabbed him, threw him on a big back, and started running toward the village. To save time, they went through the trees. When they got to Konoha, most of it was still sleeping. Kakashi instinctively moved toward Anbu HQ and brushed right past all the security meant to keep people like him out. A first year guarding the room right inside the HQ doors said, "Sorry, Shinobi-san," but Kakashi just pushed past him. "Put it down, newbie," he grunted, dropping Naruto on the ground and grabbing the blonde's small hand. Naruto had to trot to keep up with his long strides as he went to one of the common rooms. This was the room that his squad had shared with 5 other squads when he was in the Corps. There were a lot of worried people in white armor. They all felt the same way as Kakashi. Something bad was going on. Boar, the captain of a squad, was trying to set up a patrol, but the other captains, who were scared, were gathering their squads around them and refusing to help. "Dog!" someone yelled. Kakashi turned toward it and saw a former member of his squad. He was surprised to see that he had lived this long, since the average Anbu didn't live as long as 6 years, which was how long it had been since Kakashi had been caught. "It's just, Kakashi. Now, Owl," he said with a smile. Owl smiled at him through his bird mask as he looked down at the boy who was trying to get Kakashi to let go of his hand so he could run away and explore. "Oto-san, too, I hear," he said. Kakashi grunted and slid over to the bulletin board on one of the walls. He was looking for any clues about what was making the senses of every high-level shinobi go crazy. When he turned away from the board, he wasn't surprised to see Boar coming toward him. Since he seemed to be one of the more calm Anbu in the room, he asked, "Boar, do you know anything about this disturbance?" Boar smiled wide, and his white teeth showed through a hole in his mask. "He should have told someone, but I'm not in Anbu anymore, so it's not my problem." He ran a hand over his cloaked head. "It takes a lot of guts to admit that a shinobi has schizophrenic tendencies," he said in a strained voice. Then, he said, "I don't know. Everyone's just nervous. I was kind of wondering if T and I had put a neurotoxin into our air conditioner again as a joke, causing paranoid delusions, but you're here, and that worries me more than anything else." Kakashi nodded and didn't even notice how the Anbu was treating him like he was still in charge in this situation, even though he had left the Anbu long before Boar had even thought about joining. "Okay," he replied. "Then we should." He stopped talking, and all the noise in the room stopped at the same time. An alarm went off in the headquarters. The Hitachi's heart jumped into his throat, and everyone moved all at once. The alarm was a complicated system that ran through the whole village. It was made so that the defenses could be brought together at any time. It could be set off by any shinobi, and all chunin or higher were taught how, when, and why to do so. It was only to be used in the worst of times, and anyone who did so would have terrible things happen to them. The last time it was sounded was when the bloodthirsty demon Kyubi came out from outside the village walls. The normal response time for Anbu was 10 seconds, but the Corps wasted at least 3 of them standing still. Then, in a rush, everyone got ready for battle while Boar was joined by 3 more captains and a tech rookie. "It's an internal alarm," the new guy gasped. He looked like he was about to lose it, but the 5 men who had gathered around him didn't seem to care. Inside the Uchiha compound. That was it. The room was empty before he even noticed that a small blonde child had been shoved into his arms, let alone understood the growled words, "Lose him, and I'll accident you." After a few seconds, when everything had gone through his mind, He looked up at the child who was looking up at him and blinked dumbly. "Hi, Ambu-san," the boy said when no one else was around. "Didn't my dad say he was in a hurry? What are we going to do until he comes back?" The newbie took a bite. Owl felt sick as he moved quietly through the creepy streets of the Uchiha compound. He was careful not to step in the blood of his friends, so he hopped from rafter to street lamp to trash can. Every few feet, he'd reach another body, jump to its side, and check for a pulse or any sign of life. There was none, so he would grit his teeth and bite the inside of his cheek hard to keep from throwing up. He would then move the body onto its back and cross its still warm arms over its chest as a sign that this body had already been checked. His energy was all over the place. Uchiha Itachi is the next big thing in the Anbu. Wondering 13-year-old. As the oldest current member of Anbu, Owl had to run into the youngest member, and he was horrified to realize that he hadn't seen any signs that the kid would do something like this. The bird-masked Anbu was not at all comforted by the idea that every man, woman, and teenager who was looking at the chaos with him was thinking the same bad things about themselves. Another body. This time of a young girl who was probably 15 or 16 years old. Owl turned her over and sighed when he saw that her throat had been completely ripped out. Dead. A little less than half of Anbu was checking each person as they saddened their way through the massacre site. A small group was sent to protect the village while the rest went after Psychonaut McScrewed-up in an attempt to catch him. Every tracker in Anbu was on the case, including the famous ex-Anbu member Hokage, Dog, Kakashi, who could supposedly find a mole from a hot air balloon. They found the man who had set off the alarm. He had dragged himself a few feet into an alcove, leaving a lot of blood and guts behind him, and used the last of his chakra to set off the village alarm. He was just about to die when the first Anbu arrived to help. So far, he was the only Uchiha they had found who had lived the longest. Owl left the girl where she was and went on his way. Eventually, he ended up in a dark house with an open door that made him feel uneasy. At first glance, it looked empty and untouched, like the people who lived there had just left to go to dinner or see a friend. Shoes were stacked in different ways by the door. Coats were thrown over the backs of chairs and hung on hooks, and a pot of rice was boiling over in the kitchen, filling the room with the smell of burning rice. Owl sighed and turned off the stove while taking a quick look at the half-cut vegetables on the board next to him. The person who makes meals was caught off guard, but no one was in here. For a moment, there was a small glimmer of hope that Itachi wasn't quite that crazy. Maybe his mother had been spared. As he went deeper into the house, though, he grimly reminded himself that this place smelled like blood. He found them in the drawing room. Owl slid the door open softly and quietly, putting to rest any last doubts about the weasel brat's sanity. His immediate family lay on the floor, slumped together and rotting in their own blood. When he turned the woman over to see if she was still alive, he saw that she was pretty. From where she was reaching out and down as if to pet her son's cheek and welcome him home. Had he killed her before she touched him, or did he do it while she was still touching him? The Anbu thought that the father had been kneeling where he was now. He was the second person in this room to be killed by his heir. Owl moved away and left him alone. His face was permanently marked with a look of surprise and anger because he had died. With a heavy sigh, the middle-aged man dropped to his knees next to the last body. This one was pitifully small and sprawled forward on the floor, eyes glazed and staring with terror at what must have been a horrifying last sight. "Ah, hell," the man in the mask said as he put his hand on the small dark head and felt the last bit of life's heat. Poor kid. Owl moved to roll the little body over and lay it on its back, just like he had done with all the others. But before he could, the child made a whimpering sound and jerked twice, randomly. And no, came a broken, pitiful mule. And knee saw. Owl jumped back and let out a girly scream when it was startled. Ah. Then, almost right away, he felt better. "You're alive. Oi. There's someone alive in here. Where's Badger?" He held the boy still with firm hands and looked him over from head to toe to see if he was hurt. Itachi was an assassin, so he knew how to kill people quickly. They didn't have much time. So this kid must have had a lot of luck. Still, if he waited for the doctor, the kid could die now from his injuries, and it would all be over. Owl was very surprised when he looked at the boy and found no open wounds that were bleeding. However, the boy was covered in his parents' blood, which meant that Itachi had left the boy alive to see, or maybe even make him watch, what the teen had done to his own family. "That sick fuck," Owl muttered as he picked up the boy and ran with him. 2 medics had been sent to the scene by people who heard his screams. They damn well better catch him. The official leader of the tracking team, who went by the code name Bloodhound, swore and slammed his fist into the nearest tree so hard that his knuckles broke. With a cry that had nothing to do with his injury, he dropped to his knees on the branch they were standing on and leaned his mask-covered head against the tree trunk. "Fucking damn Ida." "Nothing, boss," said a small pug to the only person at the party who wasn't wearing a porcelain mask. "We've lost him. The kid's a ghost." Kakashi let out a long sigh. He knew Itachi was good at hiding his tracks because he had learned how to do it well. He was better than most at it. He knew how to walk softly, stay on ground that wouldn't keep his scent for long, and keep his chakra from sticking to his surroundings and leaving a trail. More than that, he was small and light, so his hunters couldn't follow him and he left less of a mark on the ground than any other ghost. "It's no use," said Deer, another tracker, with a bitter tone. "We've lost him." Kakashi nodded and put a hand on the back of their leader. "Let's go back," he said with a sigh. "We'll fight about this another time." After a short pause, Bloodhound gave a sad nod and stood up. "I trained this freaking kid myself," he muttered. "I think I should be able to find him." Falcon said softly, his teacher gave him credit, and Kakashi sent his dogs away. "Come on, this way," he said, showing the way home. It was a sad group that slowly made its way back to Konoha. Their anger had faded, and guilt and sadness had taken its place. As Anbu, they were not allowed to show guilt or sadness. When they got to Anbu HQ, Kakashi turned to Bloodhound. "I'll go tell Hokage-sama about the report. You can tell him about yours tomorrow. It's too late for him to listen to both of us now." Bloodhound just nodded indifferently, as if it hadn't even occurred to him that he should say that to Kakashi. Even if Dog wasn't retired, who was going to argue with him? Kakashi ran as fast as he could to the Hokage Tower, where Sarutobi was waiting. He didn't show that he was surprised to see him instead of Bloodhound. Instead, he asked right away, "Did you get him?" Kakashi gave a nod. "No, sir." Sarutobi lost his strength and fell into his chair, making him look a lot older. "Oh." The Junin asked. "How bad was it? How many people died and how many were hurt?" asked the Hokage. "One person made it out alive." A pause. "One." Kakashi repeated, thinking about how many Uchiha he knew or knew about. Just one." "Just one," Sarutobi said again. "The very last Uchiha." The words hit Kakashi hard, and for a moment he closed his eyes and let the grief for dozens of Konoha shinobi wash over him. He embraced the feeling, accepted it, and let it go. The thought that Obito would have died in this massacre if he hadn't been able to save him was harder to take, but he managed to push it out of his mind and open his eye again, having found his balance for now. Is the person who survived seriously hurt, or is he likely to live? He's not hurt, but he's very young. The doctors are with him now, and they're worried that the shock might kill him. It looks like Itachi tortured him with the Sharingan before leaving him to die. The old Hokage either didn't notice or didn't care that Kakashi had no business knowing this, or that he was supposed to ask the questions and the shinobi was supposed to answer. A who? A boy named Uchiha. Sarutobi looked at the copy of the doctor's notes in front of him. Sasuke Uchiha is the younger brother of Itachi. When Kakashi blinked, this bloody world crashed into the happier world he shared with his son. For a moment, Kakashi thought his brain was going to explode, but then he remembered that both worlds were part of the same reality. Uchiha Sasuke. He asked softly, saying the name Naruto had complained about after a day of competing with the kid at the academy. Sarutobi watched him with calculating eyes, and Kakashi felt a chill as he realized exactly where this was going. The Hitaki put his feelings aside quickly and bristled as he got ready to fight. "I wonder if..." "No," Kakashi cut him off with a resounding firmness. Sarutobi looked at the man in surprise. "No," Kakashi said again. "I am not taking on the Uchiha whelp." Sarutobi frowned and tried again. "But surely you of all people could understand." "Yeah, I'm painfully, personally aware of what he's going through. I also know he's Naruto's bitter foe. There is no way I'm inviting that headache into my home. If I did, Naruto would be driven out inside of a year. I am sorry for the kid, but Naruto comes first. He has to come first." The way Kakashi spoke clearly communicated that he would not waver about this in the slightest. "Would you have asked Minato-sensei to adopt Guy when I was 9? Sarutobi winced at even the suggestion, knowing what explosions that would have caused. Kakashi spotted the gesture and nodded knowingly. "Imagine that, only worse." It's not happening. The Hokage sighed and waved a hand in defeat. Alright. I had Hopeta, but never mind. Perhaps another solution would present itself. Then, seeming to realize something, speaking of Naruto, where is he? What happened to him while you were tracking Itachi? Kakashi stared back blankly. Did the old man really think he'd forgotten his kid? That he'd left him out and vulnerable while the village was under possible attack? When a psychopath was on a killing spree? He's in lockdown, he said simply. I put him in Anbu HQ. Sarutobi's eyes widened. Is that wise? He demanded. What if he remembers? Kakashi shrugged. I've been in and out of there often enough, sir. He knows I was in Anbu when he was born, and he'd believe me if I told him he stayed there once or twice, or even that we bunked there for a while when I first brought him back to Konoha. What's the worst that could possibly happen? Naruto watched with wide blue eyes as an armored man cleaned blood off of a variety of instruments the child had never seen before, talking all the while. Now, this little baby is extremely useful, because they never see it coming, the adult chattered, enjoying the attention. See how it looks like shears, with these little braces to stop an interrogator from cutting too deep and killing the suspect. Well, it does do that, but the beauty of this sucker is that it also gives an extremely painful electric shock. See here, on the handle? That's the battery. You just snap the shears into someone's flesh, and flick this button here, and all of a sudden they've got unexpected, excruciating pain, with no chance to brace or prepare for it. One hit works better than hours of methodical cutting. The little boy nodded, hands carefully behind his back in the universally taught position that parents implement to help kids remember not to touch whatever shiny or, in this case, lethal item they really wanted to pick up. That is cool, he said solemnly. Then, can I try it? The age of 7, his birthday had come. Once a year, we get together to celebrate how great it is that you were able to go around the sun again. That thought kept coming back to him over and over and over again. His birthday had come. He was 9 years old for sure. Why is it that those who have done the fewest orbits are always the ones who get the most attention? Last year at this time, he had a party to celebrate. All of his cousins had come, though only a small number of them were actually the children of his parents' siblings. Sasuke felt so old and grown up. It seems like it would make more sense to throw a bigger party for a 30-year-old than an 8-year-old, but this year, Mother's birthday went almost unnoticed, while your party was so big that it even had illegal fireworks. He sneaked under the tape that was still blocking his way home and crept through the quiet streets. A few months had passed since that terrible day. That day, Itachi cut through their family like a scythe through hay, putting an end to all the noise in this big, busy place. 8 years old, it's a shame Madara's plan to live forever didn't work out. The time you have is set, but it hasn't run out yet. Sasuke stopped at the gate at the end of the path that led to the front door of the house where he used to live. He could go in, get in his old bed, and pretend for the night that the massacre never happened. Pretend that he would wake up tomorrow and go downstairs to find his mother making breakfast while humming, his father sitting at the low table with his newspaper spread out on his knees, and Itachi standing in the middle of the room with a sword in his hand. Happy birthday, Otouto. You didn't do much this year, but you also didn't die, so I guess that's good enough. Sasuke's resolve broke with a whimper, and he ran away from the place that had been his home. As he ran, tears blinded him. Just kept running and running as if he could get away from the way his world was falling apart. When he finally stopped, his chest was heaving and his sides were aching like crazy. He looked around and felt his throat close up as he realized he was in the Uchiha plot in Konoha's cemetery. After he thought about it for a moment, he started to walk between the rows and rows of almost new graves. It had been 5 months since they were buried, and the naked mounds of earth were flattening and grass was moving in to hide where the coffins had been put into the ground. After a long time, Sasuke was finally standing in front of the 2 graves of his parents. He stood on the grave for a while with his hand on the carved name of his father. Then he realized he was standing right on top of the man and quickly got off the grave. Then he looked at the gravestone of his mother and traced the letters of her names. With a sob, he sat down in the small space between the 2 markers, curled up into a ball, and put his head in his arms. He cried on his 9th birthday. Much later, when the sun had long since gone down and it was time for evening shift to switch to night shift, a certain Anbu showed up to take over watching over the Uchiha survivor from the one who had been doing so. Ack. Owl sighed as he looked at the boy, who was lying on his stomach on a solid patch of grass between the patchy grass dirt graves of his parents. He been here long? he asked Rat. Rat nodded tiredly. Since a little before noon, he said. Owl nodded. Go to sleep, Rat. You seem tired. Oh, I am, man. I'll be glad when we rebuild the police force. Right now I'm so busy I can't remember what my bunk looks like. Take care of yourself, old man. Owl made a noise to protest the address and pretended to growl at the younger Anbu to get it to leave. As soon as he was alone, his smile faded, and he walked over to Uchiha Sasuke's small body. As he did so, he thought about how the kid had been on his belly and lifeless the night his clan died. Okay, kiddo, he said with a sigh as he got down on his knees and gently turned the boy over in his arms. It's against the rules to let you sleep outside, but you'll get sick if I let you. I'll take you home. The boy's face was covered in dirt and tears. This showed Owl that he had been sad for a whole day. From the way he felt, it was clear that the boy wasn't getting enough food. Not that I blame him, the Anbu thought dryly, trying not to think about that terrible night. If this gets better at all, it will take time. Poor brat. Owl carried the new 9-year-old back to the small apartment Sarutobi had given him. He looked around at the neatly arranged furniture and felt sorry for him. At least the boy kept his room clean. Owl couldn't stand to trip over things every time she walked. Here we go, he said softly as he helped the boy take off his sandals and jacket and put him in his bed. He checked the blankets to make sure they were warm enough. After he thought about it for a moment, he got a washcloth, wet it with warm water, and carefully cleaned the boy's face. Like most children, Sasuke was dead to the world when he fell asleep from being too tired. He didn't even move when Owl wiped his face. When he was done, he smoothed the boy's wild hair back, and he was happy to see that Sasuke's face looked a little less worried. Poor kid, he said this time out loud. Take good care of yourself, Sasuke. Owl went to the windowsill and stayed there until Panther came to help him just after dawn. He never talked about the small thing again. The Hitachi's home was peaceful. Peaceful, even. The summer evening sun shone calmly down, and the big oak tree in the backyard cast pretty patterns of shade. Naruto was doing his homework at the table in the dining room while his father worked on making dinner for the two of them to share. Normalcy like that couldn't last as long as there were people with Hitachi or Uzumaki genes in the house. This time, chaos came in the form of a man in white from Anbu. Dog-san. The man said as he walked up to the kitchen window over the sink where Kakashi was washing carrots. Kakashi paused for a split second before turning to fill the rice cooker with the right amount of rice. Your job is done, Ox-san. I'm Hitachi-san. You've been called back to duty, Ox told him in a flat voice. Kakashi said, He didn't sound too worried. Is that true? And what am I being called back to do? That's secret, Ox said with a stone face. Kakashi actually laughed at that. It was the same kind of dry laugh he used to have when he found something so sad, funny, or scary that he had to make a sound or go crazy. Back when he didn't have Naruto and hadn't yet found the true, happy humor in something innocent. Let me explain something to you, Ox-san, he said casually as he began to thinly slice an eggplant. If he cut the pieces thin enough and put them in something else, Naruto sometimes ate them by accident. You're going to tell me everything you know about this mission. Then I'll decide if I'll accept it and if it's worth putting on my dog mask. I'm not going to move with you a single step until all of this happens. Ox didn't look happy. I can't do that, sir, he told him. Kakashi just shrugged. He threw the eggplant into the stew that was boiling on the stove and turned down the heat so it wouldn't burn. He also added a bunch of frozen peas and turned to the rice cooker to stop the water from boiling over. He yelled, Naruto, at the door. Have you finished all your homework yet? Nearly, Dad. Came the answer from the next room. One more question. Well, finish it and then set the table, okay. Dinner is almost ready. And wash your hands. Okay. Kakashi went to the Anbu again. Are you okay, Ox-san? He asked in a fake way. You've been called back to duty, Anbu Captain Dog, Ox said over and over again. Kakashi let out a long sigh. Ox-san, he said clearly, either tell me what's going on, or I won't go. I'm not an idiot, and I'm as stubborn as they come. If you refuse to tell me, you'll have to take me by force. Are you up to that challenge? Ox was unsure. Even though he was barefoot in a kitchen with a child's drawing on the wall and was watching his dinner cook like a woman without a gun in sight, this man was still dangerous. He almost killed himself with the way he used that plastic spatula. Ox suddenly remembered who he was ignoring, which made him wonder how he could have forgotten in the first place. And took a small step backward. The Hokage is meeting with a diplomatic party from Suna, he blurted out before he made a conscious decision to do so. Because Dog is well known and feared, he wants you to join the Anbu Guard. He thinks that with you there, they will be easier to get to behave. Kakashi let out a small sigh. His Anbu cover was popular, right? Damn. That completely defeated the point of using a code name. Even though no one knew who he was, it was easier to find him if they knew his code and what he had done behind it, increasing the chances that his son will be caught in the crosshairs. When he found the leak, whoever it was would be in trouble. Back to the problem at hand, thanks to Itachi, most of the police force was killed, so Anbu had to work hard to make up for the loss and do the jobs of both forces. So, the Hokage had to look for people to help him, which led to Kakashi working as Dog in his spare time and pulling double shifts. He wasn't the only one. Other retired ninja had been called back to work, some of them full-time, and some Junin were even being sent on Anbu-ranked missions, which meant that the Hokage was really reaching for the bottom of the barrel. Dog that he was, Kakashi was never given patrol or gate duty. Oh no, it was always, save the princess, kill the daimyo, or, frighten the diplomats with the power of your gaze, but don't start an international scandal. Pray you never get famous, kid, he told Ox in a harsh voice. It's not all it's cracked up to be. Watch the food while I go find my uniform. Ox had just started to protest when Kakashi came back and looked at him with a frown. He asked, how long is this mission going to take? The diplomatic party will arrive tonight. You need to keep an eye on them all night, and in the morning they will meet with the Hokage.
Kakashi's scowl got even worse. That meant Naruto would be alone for 1 or 2 nights, depending on how long the meeting lasted. Way too long for a child of 7. But the last time he left Pakun to watch Naruto, Kakashi came home to find that the pug had let Naruto train until he was too tired to move and hadn't fed him more than once a day. The Hitaki didn't need Sum to smack him on the back of the head to realize that he had made a bad choice of babysitter. Who else could keep an eye on him? Kiba and Hana had the flu, but Naruto never seemed to get sick. Sum was too busy taking care of Kiba and Hana to also take care of Naruto, so Kakashi couldn't ask her to do that. Jiraiya was out of town. Genma was probably drunk by now. Kurenai had to work early tomorrow morning. Enko was just a bad idea. Rado was on a mission to aim. Asuma and Yugo were who knows where, and Hayate had caught another flu after spending 2 seconds with Sum's kids.
Ox asked Dog-san, Dog-san, is there something wrong? Kakashi scowled at him. I haven't made any plans for my son's care, he said in a flat tone. Ox looked relieved. Plans have been made, and a police officer will keep an eye on Hitaki Naruto inside Anbu headquarters. Yeah, Kakashi drawled. No way. The last time I let one of you babysit, and it was an emergency, I was sitting on a couch with Naruto, facing Iruka-sensei and a child psychologist who both wanted to know why my son was playing ninja and sticking people with pens and compasses. Behind his mask, Ox's mouth moved. Then he asked, what will you do with him? Kakashi sighed. I cross a line I promised myself I would never cross, he answered seriously. Ox felt a chill go down his spine, and it wasn't for no reason. Naruto was looking at him with a suspicious look. It was hard to believe that those big blue eyes could make a hole in your back. Kakashi was darning a hole in his cloak while wearing his white Anbu armor. Ox had left with the promise to cover for him until Naruto's babysitter arrived. It was up to Kakashi to find the babysitter, get him to help, and then tell Naruto the news. There's no need to say that Naruto wasn't impressed. Kakashi took a chance and looked at the boy, which made him cringe inside. Now, the boy looked so hurt that you'd think Kakashi had put carbonic acid in his puppy's water or something.
I should be back by tomorrow night, he said. Naruto kept staring at him and, like a pro, gave him a little lip wiggle. Kakashi finished the last stitch and used a small pair of scissors to cut the thread. Be good, he told them as he threw the white cloak over his shoulders and tied it around his neck. He was still being looked at by Naruto. Kakashi walked up to the boy and put his hand on his shoulder. He said, seriously, be good. That's the only way to get through this. Good luck.
The doorbell rang right on time, and then someone quickly knocked on the door. Naruto gave up his award-winning, hurt, abandoned, and unloved look and ran away with a very real look of horror on his face. Kakashi got himself together, picked up his newly polished dog mask, and walked down the stairs to the front door. He said, good evening, guy, to the man outside and moved out of the way so the green beast could come in. Thank you for coming so quickly. It's nothing, my rival, Guy said as he walked inside and stopped to take off his sandals. It was a very human thing for the very odd man to do. I'm glad I could help you with your wonderful but difficult task of being a parent. I'm glad you finally took me up on my offer of help. There's food in the fridge, Kakashi said as he bent down to put his own sandals on. Help yourself to whatever you want. Naruto has had his dinner and done his homework. He just needs a bath. Bedtime is at 7:30, lights out at 8 o'clock, and he should be up by 4:45. Usually, I run him through some exercises in the morning, and you're welcome to do the same, but, Guy, you really can't push him too hard. He needs to be awake for school. Guy did a good guy pose, which Kakashi thought was number 18. Do not worry, my opposition. I will make sure that your beloved child only has to go through a hard workout, but that's okay, he'll be more than ready for the day. Right. School starts at 9, he needs to be there by 10.
Just drop him at the gate, he can find his own classroom. If my mission's not done, school ends at 3:30, and just get him some ramen or something on the way home for dinner. I've left money on the counter for anything he needs. I think that's everything. Kakashi put on his shoes and stood up, rubbing the back of his head. I should be back home by tomorrow, but if I'm not, I'd say something went wrong if I'm not back by the next night, but that's not likely to happen on this mission.
Guy nodded enthusiastically and made notes in a small notebook. I get it, my rival. I'll be a great caretaker for your most precious heir in your place. He paused and looked around. Where is Naruto when he was young? Kakashi put a few things in his kunai pouch and pulled up the hood of his cloak to cover his hair. I think you'll find him hiding under the bed in the spare room. Have fun. He flipped his fingers in a salute and ran away, putting his mask back on as soon as he was out of sight. When the door to the spare room opened, Naruto, who was hiding under the bed, whimpered. Where are you, my young friend? Naruto didn't want to answer, so he bit his lip. Guy, on the other hand, hunkered down and crawled under the bed on his stomach. His dad must have sold him out. Bastard. Hello, son of my rival. It's a happy day. You and I will enjoy the flames of youth together while your respected father finishes his mission of great importance. Hello, Froggy-san, said the boy, admitting that he had lost. So, how do you want to enjoy the flames of youth? Ah. Guy tried to strike a pose or flail his arms or something, and then he seemed to realize that he was stuck between the bed above him and the floor below. After a moment of helpless wiggling, he was able to get back into the open. Again, he said, and jumped to his feet and struck a pose. How about a game? Naruto reluctantly came out from under the bed and sat on his knees to look up at the person or thing that his father had hired to watch him overnight. A few months ago, Kakashi sat Naruto down and told him in detail that Maida Guy was a real person, even if she was strange. Naruto thought he knew that in his head, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this green beast was not normal. In any case, he had no plans to stop calling him Froggy-san, if only because he thought the name fit the person. Dad often had dogs watch him, so a mutant frog didn't seem like such a big deal. Okay, he said. What game shall we play? Guy considered. He asked, would you like to play Attack the Post? Naruto hesitated. That was basically training in the form of attacking a post or a tree or a log. Whoever passes out first loses. I'm not supposed to be working myself up at this time of night, he said, and he was right. Also, the rule that you can't lie didn't apply to Froggy-san. It just didn't. Guy looked like he was thinking. He shouted, then we'll play an inside game of youth. We are going to play shogi. Ryu buried the board, Naruto said, naming one of his father's dogs that was always getting into trouble. Guy deflated. He asked in a reasonable way, what games have your faithful canine comrades not played? Naruto bit his lower lip. Why don't we play Go Fish? He said. Guy got happier. Yes, we will. And if I lose, I'll do 100 push-ups. Naruto tried to say, no, you really don't have to, but the man in green had already run downstairs to get the deck of cards. The child didn't want to go because he thought it would be a long night. After a while, Guy finished her push-ups and did a victory pose. There, young friend, you can see that I kept my promise. Naruto had been playing solitaire with the deck of cards, but he stopped and put the cards in a neat pile. Oh, that's good. Would you like to play Snap? Of course. And if I lose, I'll walk around on my hands for the rest of the night. You really don't have to do that, the young Hokage said. We don't have to compete, we could just play. No, I've made a promise, and I'm going to keep it. Start. Is it time for bed yet? Snap. Victory to the flames of youth. Froggy-san, that's not a pair. This is how the rest of the evening went, and when the clock hit 7:30, Naruto ran to his room. Guy followed him upstairs and gently walked on his hands to tuck him in. They said goodnight for a long time after Dad had said it was time for lights out. Naruto finally had to pretend to sleep to get him to leave. It was tiring to have Froggy-san watch over me. In Kumokagore, the fog was thick and heavy. The village was built on a mountain, which was completely hidden by clouds that morning. The Raikage was looking out the window. The fog was so thick that it covered the street just 3 floors below, but he could still hear his village going about its business. Today, he was thinking about how few able-bodied shinobi there were in his village. The shinobi in Kumo were getting older, and each generation had fewer children than the one before it. This meant that there were more adults than children in the village. Soon, they would only have half or a third as many shinobi as they do now because most of them were getting too old and no new ones were coming forward to take their place.
The Raikage was well aware of this, so he sent his men to the villages in Kaminari no Kuni to look for children to bring back to Kumo and train as shinobi. He also put pressure on Kunoichi, making it hard for those who weren't married and even harder for those who didn't have children. He also offered money and promotions to any shinobi who had children. During the search for the next generation of Kumo ninja, the Hotake situation came to light, and the Yondaime Raikage was given a frustrating task to do. Hotake had moved to a big town in the south of Lightning Country. The size of the town probably kept people from finding out about him. Frustratingly, the only people who seemed to know the mother who tied the youngest Hotake genius to Kumo seemed to be the girl's parents, a pair of innkeepers who muttered darkly about the man they blamed for the death of their daughter and scowled when questioned about their grandchild, but seemed incredibly reluctant to offer details.
7 years later, the details of how it happened were, of course, no longer important.
The only thing that mattered to the Yondaime was getting the young Hotake back to where his mother's blood said he should be.
A first attempt had ended disastrously, and the Raikage had abandoned the venture. But recently, he heard rumors about how powerful the young boy was, which made him think again about trying to get him. He was still young enough to influence, young enough to win his loyalty, and word had it that he was a prize well worth working for. Imagine a shinobi with the skills and blood of Hotake, copycat. Kakashi putting his power and genes behind Kumo. The picture looks so tempting that it was hard to resist.
Such an endeavor would need to be planned. If he had learnt anything from the retrieval missions to Konoha in the past to seeking both the Hyuga and Hotake heirs, it was that, whatever her faults, Konoha guarded her children well. And the angry dads she held should never be crossed.
Another option would be to go after the Uchiha child.
Word of how the famous clan was almost completely wiped out had spread far and wide through all countries. There were no angry fathers guarding that boy's doorstep anymore. But the Raikage wasn't an idiot. He was aware that the Uchiha whelp was likely being guarded like the treasure he was. Not only that, but every gold digger in the world was going to try to get Uchiha, and he didn't know if the boy would be easy to control if he was captured. The Yondaime paused, turning away from his window to pour himself a cup of green tea from the pot set on the gilded wooden table nearby. Breathing in the steam rising off of it, he sank down into a comfortable chair and leant backwards. He would abandon the quest for the Hyuga Keke Genkai, but the Hotake, what better time to snatch him than when the entire world was watching the Uchiha? Surely the village would relax its constant vigilance around one genius when faced with the obvious vulnerability of the other. The Raikage smirked into his tea, taking a long sip of it and savoring the slightly bitter flavor. Given time and planning, the opportunity to win the young Hotake would be sure to come along. Indeed, the only real challenge would be the boy's exceptionally talented father, who seemed paranoid enough to be on guard at all times.
That can be circumnavigated, the village leader thought confidently. Sooner or later, there will be a flaw, an error of judgment that we can exploit.
Sooner or later, he would win his prize. A few hushed giggles were being muffled through the classroom, mostly kept in check by Mizuki-sensei's growling. Iruka-sensei seemed to be wavering between irritation and amusement, unsure of how to cope with the problem that was Naruto fast asleep at his desk. The 7-year-old had wandered into the classroom in a sort of daze, covered in grass clippings. Iruka pulled him aside and asked him quietly if something was wrong. She was worried that the boy had been robbed on his way to school, but all he said was something about frogs, a crazy babysitter, and the babysitter's ideas about what a light workout was. The blonde also said that he was sure that his father hated him, but he said it in a way that Iruka wasn't supposed to hear.
Now, in the middle of the morning, Itachi was showing how young he was by taking a nap on his math book while his pencil was still loosely in his hand. Iruka was clearly thinking about whether he should wake up the child to continue his lesson or let him get some much-needed rest. Mizuki pushed his way between Sasuke and Kiba, who were about to fight after a heated whispered argument about whether Naruto's unconscious state was disgraceful or cute. Each 9-year-old glared at the teacher's assistant and looked like a child who would never use the words disgraceful or cute. Behind her big, pale eyes, Hyuga Hinata watched all of this. When the lunch bell rang and Iruka-sensei let the class out, Mizuki-sensei moved Sasuke-kun and Kiba-kun and put them at opposite ends of the playground. Hinata didn't rush to put her books in a neat stack on her desk. She hesitated as she picked up her bento box from the side of the room where she kept it. Iruka-sensei, she said shyly to the man wiping off the blackboard. Iruka glanced at her. Yes, Hinata-kun, he said. Hinata put her head down. Well, you see, I was just wondering, she said, that is, if it's not a problem, could I maybe stay inside today at lunch, just to keep Naruto-chan Naruto-kun. For a moment, she looked worried. He doesn't like it when I call him CH-chan anymore, she whispered, and Iruka had to fight not to smile. He, too, had been cornered by an angry Naruto and told that he was much too big to be called Naruto-chan, like a little baby. I understand, Hinata, the teacher said in a nice way. I won't tell him about your mistake, because everyone makes them. The little girl seemed very happy. She stuttered, poking her 2 index fingers together in front of her in a nervous way. What I meant to ask was, could I please stay inside so that if Naruto-kun wakes you up, he won't be alone? Iruka had planned to spend his lunch break watching over the blonde while she slept, and he barely kept his body from sagging with relief. That would be very helpful, Hinata-kun, he told her. Thank you. Then, looking at the clock on the wall, he said, tell you what. If he hasn't woken up 10 minutes after the bell rings, you come get me, and we'll move him somewhere he can sleep for a while. This isn't like Naruto-kun. He must be tired. He can make up the work with me later, when the rest of you are doing taijutsu practice. Hinata stuttered out her agreement, and Iruka fled to the staff room to collapse with all the other teachers not on playground duty. Someone gave him a cup of coffee, and the caffeine made him forget about everything for a while. Hinata went back to the classroom and sat down at the desk next to where Naruto was lying down. He had a small amount of drool on the corner of his mouth. The little girl bit her lip so she wouldn't laugh at how soundly asleep the younger child was. She thought it was rude to laugh at how soundly asleep the younger child was. Instead, she opened her bento box and ate quietly while waiting to see if Naruto would wake up before the deadline. When he didn't, she did as she was told and went to get Iruka-sensei. That afternoon, she went back to her lessons thinking that Naruto was just as cute as her 5-year-old sister Hanabi. Asuma shook his head and signed the piece of paper that said the genin team he had been testing had failed. Graduates shouldn't be so sad.
His father thought it would be a good idea to try to get Asuma a job as a sensei, and Asuma went along with it to keep the fragile piece they had found. After he turned in the form at the right desk in the Hokage tower, he looked across the room and smiled when he saw Kakashi doing the same thing in a hurry.
He said, "Hey, Kakashi." The man with silver hair turned around and gave a half salute when he saw him.
Yo. Asuma grinned and asked, "Failed another lot?" Kakashi shrugged in a, "You got me," kind of way.
"Poor bunch," he said offhandedly, not caring that the Sarutobi followed him in step as they walked away from the tower. When the girl scraped her knee, she began to cry.
Asuma made the right sound of disbelief and disgust as he looked at the white bundle under Kakashi's arm.
It could only be an Anbu captain's cloak, which was probably wrapped around a mask of the same style. Asuma gave himself a small frown. It wasn't a secret that Kakashi had been in Anbu or that he was one of the best in the program.
What was a secret, though, was which Anbu Kakashi had been in. But the Junin thought Kakashi had left the corps after the mission that led to the birth of his son. Even though the Hokage had given up a promising career to help the boy, the presence of a uniform showed that Kakashi's time in the Anbu might not be over as much as the man had made everyone think. Maybe Kakashi used the fact that the forces were spread out to offer his help. Asuma's stomach tightened as he thought about the Kakashi of then, the faceless, emotionless, broken teenager he had written off as a peer he didn't like and a technical comrade. That Kakashi had become hardened and unreachable, and that he had been hurt beyond repair, though Asuma didn't know why. The dark-haired man looked at his kind of friend with some curiosity. The little boy Kakashi brought home was probably the only mistake the perfect shinobi ever made, but it was a wonderful mistake that made a big difference in the aloof person who became a father before he was fully grown up. What would happen to the blonde ray of sunshine if Kakashi rejoined Anbu and one night missed a step in the dance with death? "Hey, Kakashi," he said on the spot as they walked down the street into the busy center of the village. They weren't really walking together, but they were going in the same general direction at the same time. Kakashi blinked and looked at Asuma. He was in his own little world. He said, yes. Asuma thought about it and reached for his pack of cigarettes.
What will happen to your kid if the worst happens? He asked bluntly, putting a white stick in his mouth and putting the box with the rest back in his pocket. Kakashi looked sad.
"What made you worry?" he asked, almost as a joke. "Do I look ill?" Asuma said with a bit of bite, "You look like you're carrying around your death veil." He was surprised at how angry he felt on Naruto's behalf right away. Kakashi looked surprised, then looked down to see where he was carrying his Anbu uniform. "I'd forgotten I still had this," he said, rearranging the bundle so it was flat enough to slide down the front of his vest. "I had to come right from another mission to test the genin group." "What a waste of time," he said with a half laugh before he realized Asuma wasn't laughing. "What's the matter, Asuma?"
That kid of yours is about the same age as you were when your dad died, right? Kakashi stopped in the middle of the road and did not move. Asuma also stopped and turned to look at the Hokage straight on. Kakashi asked in a low, dangerous voice, "What the fuck are you doing?" He didn't know if he was being teased, threatened, or given some kind of misguided support. "I'm just wondering if you've realized that hurting yourself doesn't hurt you as much as it used to."
Asuma was worried about Naruto, and Kakashi stared at him for a long time before realizing that Asuma was worried that the elder Hokage was slipping back into the dangerous state of mind he had lived in until he was 16. That devil may care. The mission is all that matters, perfect soldier way of thinking that had been forced out of him when he became a father.
"The Hokage asked me to stand in on a few missions," he said quickly. "He has so few hands that he needs every able-bodied man with the right skills to help out. If something bad happens, Naruto will be taken care of." Asuma was calm, but he still looked a little worried. "Dad was always a little cold. Do you know where the kid will go?"
Kakashi gave a nod, and the two of them moved again. "Yeah," he said, avoiding a small group of women who were window shopping as they walked into the business district. "Well, I mean, he has a godfather, and it's not like Sum would let him starve or something." There was a moment of silence, and then Kakashi smiled, his eyes crinkling up with happiness. "But I don't plan to die, so don't worry about it," he said. Asuma laughed and finally lit his cigarette. "Gotcha. Hey, do you want to grab something to eat? I'm pretty sure we could meet up with some of the others if we look for them."
Kakashi was already shaking his head. "I have to hurry to catch Naruto before Guy does and makes him even more upset."
Asuma spluttered. "Guy?" he asked as he coughed and dropped his cigarette. He brushed his sleeve to make sure it wasn't on fire. "You let Guy watch over him."
"Just for the night," said Kakashi. "I was so desperate." Asuma just laughed. "Dude, you need a wife," he sputtered through his laughter. Kakashi made a face. "Stop arranging my life, man," he told him. "You should worry about that yourself. What's going on with Kurenai?" It was a lot of fun to watch Asuma's blush move across her face. He said, "We're just friends," a bit too quickly. Kakashi snorted. He asked, "Really? I didn't know that only friends spent nights together." He stopped when Asuma pushed him.
"Shut up." The man became serious again. "You know," he said, "you can put me down as someone who could help take care of your kid if, you know." Asuma knew that there weren't many people his age who wouldn't be ready to take care of Kakashi's son if he didn't come back from a mission. After looking at him for a moment, Kakashi gave him a shrug. "Thanks. What else could I say?" Not long after that, they went their separate ways. Asuma saw Kurenai and Genma sitting under a tree next to a cafe, and Kakashi went to the academy, stopping by Guy on the way to tell him he was back and thank him again for taking care of Naruto. For once, the boy didn't run to meet him. Kakashi thought it was kind of funny and wondered if his son was giving him trouble.
But almost as soon as that thought crossed his mind, he saw the child with the bright hair talking with a group of other kids. Kiba was one of them, but as Kakashi watched, he gave Naruto a friendly bump, waved to the others, and ran away, jumping over the academy fence and heading home. Everyone left quickly, going back to their own homes, leaving Naruto alone with two children with dark hair. From a distance, it took Kakashi a moment to recognize them, but when the boy turned, he saw the boy's face. The Junin knew right away that Naruto had found Hyuga Hiashi's kids. When he got close to them, Kakashi tried to remember what their names were. Since there was a boy and a girl, they must have been Hiashi's son and grandson. Hinata? Or was that just the baby? The boy's name was easier to remember because it didn't start with a H, Neji.
Good afternoon, kids, the grown-up said in a cheerful tone. Naruto lunged at him.
Dad. Never, ever leave me alone with Froggy-san again. He's so weird. He means well, Kakashi said without much thought. Did you enjoy school today? Naruto looked embarrassed. I was so tired this morning, he said, his face turning red. Froggy-san took me out before school to do stuff and I kind of fell asleep in maths. Kakashi laughed a little, but he was also thinking about how he would punish Guy for not following his very simple instructions. Oh, dear. Was Iruka-sensei very mad? No, Naruto said with a smile. I thought he was going to be mad, but he let me sleep and then kept me in when Mizuki-sensei took the class outside to do taijutsu so I could make up the work I missed. Hinata-chan and Neji-kun were keeping me company until you came. So it was Hinata, huh? So, what was the name of her sister? That was very kind of them, Kakashi said in a friendly way, looking at where the girl was going and getting worried that her head might explode. The boy kept a cool eye on him. Neji-kun. Kakashi chose his target. How old are you right now? 10, sir, was the kind answer. It won't be long until you finish school. 2 years, sir. No change in tone or facial expression. I've heard you're quite talented, Kakashi said. One of Neji's shoulders moved just a little bit. Not so much for my family, sir. He didn't say this because he was proud of his clan's skills. He said it because he felt like a loser. How sweet. Really? Your uncle tells me otherwise. He talks about you a lot when we talk, and he's proud of how far you've come. This wasn't even a lie. Hiashi spoke very highly of his nephew. Oh, how different. A flash of complete shock, then a wave of clear happiness at the news. Neji's pale eyes stopped looking at him, and he looked down at his feet, feeling a little shy. Thank you for telling me, sir, he said in a low voice. Kakashi smiled. He was going to drop the matter for now, but it was fun to get the little Hiashi clone to react. Well, since you waited for me, why don't I buy you all something to eat? He asked, knowing that Naruto had missed lunch because he was asleep. Hinata and Neji were not sure what to do, but Naruto's eyes lit up. Hinata whispered, Thank you for the offer, Hataki-sama, but we have to get home. Then we'll walk you, Kakashi said simply, taking Naruto's hand out of habit. Naruto pulled on the arm because he didn't like how his classmates were drawing attention to how young he was, but he soon gave up and grabbed Hinata's hand with his free hand. Hinata turned red. The little Hataki said, yes, we'll take you home. Thank you. Hinata stuttered, shyly putting her free hand in one of Neji's. Kakashi bit his lip so he wouldn't laugh at the look on the boy's face, but the branch member Hyuga didn't run away. Instead, he joined the little chain and walked down the street with them. Taking the kids home turned into staying for afternoon tea, which turned into an invitation to dinner, which Kakashi accepted because he didn't know what else to feed his kid tonight and knew he'd have to get takeout. By the time he got Naruto, who was sleeping, into his arms and finished the trip home, it was really dark. He said goodbye to Hiashi at the gate of the huge Hyuga compound. He never even thought about what might happen because of everything that had happened in the last 48 hours.
So this was it for today. I will continue the story in next part. Till then, we weeb offline.